our roundtable. Today, there are three of us that are going to be co-facilitating our time together. My name is Victoria Lopez-Herrera, and I am at the University of Texas in San Antonio. And our focus today is going to really be around, leading from the middle, and in particular during this time of a pandemic, as well as social injustices happening in our country. So how are we navigating that from the middle and wanting to be able to engage in learning, as well as some dialogue about this, as well as hopefully maybe hear from you all what you might be looking for, any tools that you might need that NIRSA can help with, or even if you want to share with our fellow colleagues. So from where I sit as a middle manager, I have been overseeing professional staff for about 10 years in different ways from different areas in higher education. So I think that my approach has changed over time as I've gained more experience, and in particular, when it comes to working from home, right, or working at home, and during a pandemic and during a time of social unrest in our country, I have had to stop and really think about my strengths and how I can leverage my strengths in these new and different environments. So I'm still learning, is how I feel. So how about that, Lance? I'll kick it to you.
Yeah, thanks, Victoria. Lance Haynie here at the University of Georgia. Been in the field for about 12 years, started at University of Alabama, transitioned here to Athens, Georgia about 2012. My experience with supervising is I had one full-time direct report when I came here as the outdoor adventure director, and then was able to take the place of my supervisor, and now have multiple direct reports. And very similar to Victoria, it's evolved over time and continues to evolve. Something that in particular that I think I've learned during this time, the past 3 months anyway, is I found that I'm actually a little bit more relationally skilled than I thought I was. That was always an insecurity of mine, of being able to consciously step out of some of my more task-oriented side and really connect on an emotional level with staff. And I found that came actually quite a bit easier than I thought it would during this time. I find that's a really great way that I've been able to add value to my team and be there for them as people before their position. And so anyway, I'm glad to get into the discussion today. So glad you were all here, and I'll kick it over to Erin.
Awesome. Thanks, Lance and Victoria. I'm Erin Patchett, she, her pronouns. I work at Colorado State University, and I've been there for about 10 years and in the field since, I don't even know when, forever, 15 years maybe. And yeah, I'm a middle manager as well. I've got 4 direct full-time staff, 3 students, and plenty of indirects, right, that we are always worrying about and trying to support as supervisors. When I think, so I can relate to both things you two have shared 100%. And then I think the other thing, when I've been reflecting a lot on my leadership from home these days, is that I really learned that I need to be more explicit with my words. Like I really need to say what I mean these days, because all these clues that we often get to pick up on when we're in community in person together, they get lost a little bit. And so yeah, I've had to be a lot more just direct with like, here's where I'm at, or here's what I'm hearing from you, and use my words, which is what I tell my first grader all the time, is we need to use our words. And now I'm trying to do what I say to other people and do that as well. Yeah, so happy to be here. I see lots of familiar faces. I'm looking forward to this conversation.
So I just want to remind everybody that the session is being recorded, and we do utilize that chat box. So if there is anything that you want to share or questions, we'll be monitoring that chat box. And as a courtesy, if you could also, if you're sharing any resources, or if you have a question or you're providing an example, if you could include what institution or what organization that you're a part of in the event that someone else wants to reach out to you. And if they come back and review the chat, they'll know who to direct any questions to. So Lance, you want to get started?
Yeah, absolutely. The first part of the conversation here, we're going to focus on just leadership and leadership in your position over the last 3 months. So in thinking over the last 3 months, we've obviously encountered challenges, but what was most challenging for you from a leadership standpoint? I'm going to give another question here just to kind of add to the conversation a little bit. So challenges, right, in your leadership role. And then how did you continue to add value and support your staff through those challenges? So if anybody's got some great things to share, please go ahead.
No, I can always talk. So this is Vicki from Nebraska. And I would say for me, the challenges, I lean toward the people side versus the operational side. And sometimes in this process with this trying to get things open and this and that and the other, everything seems to be very focused on the operational side. And I think sometimes I'm feeling a little bit stressed about the fact that we need to keep those conversations with the people going probably more often than we had before, even though we probably were doing it. We were just doing it, drop by and stop in and that kind of stuff. But now that we don't see everybody every day, I think I see the tension. You know, I like Zoom for that reason. I can see their face. I think, Erin, you mentioned that, you know, we don't see their faces and their reactions, but I like it for that reason because I can see them and you know, be able to feel good about asking, are you okay? Because I see that people side, and there's a lot of people, myself included, who are get really stressed out about the fact that I can't be around people and you know, give hugs and do all those things that people do. And so I really try to be cognizant of that. And I think that's a difficult part right now, is that we're not being able to do some of that, and it's wearing thin on a lot of people.
Mm-hmm.
I'll share. I'm Marc Iturriaga. I'm with Bonobo, and actually today I just registered my business with NIRSA. So I've been a long time NIRSA member before that, but now officially on the consultation side. And I want to, you know, echo what Vicki said about the people and really the framework of my work in being on a lot of these webinars and talking with a lot of colleagues. You know, on that operational side, we're really thinking about the systems and structures, yet oftentimes we forget to ask, well, how do people feel about this? How is this going to affect the people? So actually, I'm writing an article right now about, you know, putting a lens of people when we reopen, because risk management is so huge and important as part of that experience. But, you know, oftentimes I'm not hearing is how do we see what a person who's going to come into our facility is going to feel like? How is that new change going to do that? Even when we think about EDI as well, a lot of these new changes and structures, we're so focused on, okay, risk management. It's like, well, how might a mask affect someone with hearing challenges? You know, what about those that want to navigate and understand the experience? Are we putting staff there to help facilitate that rather than just structurally and worrying about procedures and that? And so, you know, that's kind of the challenges and the questions. I think one of the things we need to be doing here is asking more questions, specifically people-focused questions, is how are they going to feel? And I think that's not only our patrons, that's our staff, that's members, that's everyone, really asking them, how are they feeling about this, and what can we do to kind of shift that lens so that maybe some of our structures and policies need to change or be tweaked during this reopening and as we move forward, because we haven't taken the people side of it and that really impacts. And I think that comes from, you know, a really big ownership of empathy with our staff and allowing them to understand that there's going to be a lot of frustrations. You know, how do we do a focus of facilitation versus enforcement when patrons come into our facilities? And really, you know, it's going to take a lot of patience, but really it's interesting because these are things we probably should have been doing beforehand anyways, but now it's just even more highlighted and more focused. So, you know, it's a great time to take that step back and kind of, you know, even as supervisors, just taking a step and watching that experience as patrons come in and how your staff are interacting, and using those as more learning points and teachable moments than rather worrying about what the handbook says and what the policy says, so that we can really take that into a focus of people.
I guess I'll speak. My name is Johanna. I'm the Assistant Director of Fitness at Texas Tech University. So I'm just stepping in right now for my boss. But one of the challenges we've been facing has been the communication from above our director. So every day it's something different. So the whole entire department, we're always on edge. It's like, oh my God, we just planned something out for facilities and now we have to literally change everything out. So we actually opened up our doors last Monday, and we are opening up group fitness, personal training, and CrossFit on June 15th. And so, but again, every day is just something new. So it's just been, that part's been frustrating. But just like everyone else, I mean, everyone's been really good about asking questions. How are you feeling? I'm at home. I put in my 4 or 5 hours this morning and I said, I'm out, I'm going home, I'm having my me time. So it's been really nice that they've been really working with our, levels of stress and making sure that we're good and we're happy. And when we are at work, we are working. And then when we're done for the day, we're done. So we've been really grateful for that, but that's what's happening at Tech.
I'll say something real quick. Hey, everybody, Justin Cato from Texas A&M Commerce. Good to see everyone's beautiful smiling faces. I know for me, one of the biggest challenges, she is cut after my own heart of needing that interaction of people and, going 2-3 months of not getting that, to physically see people and interact with them and just handshake or fist bump or a hug or whatever has been really hard. And I'm sure it is for all of us because we're all people like that. But my crew, I've got 2 direct reports with 2 coordinators and 2 GAs. So I've got like 6 people total underneath me. And my crew is a little different, whereas, I enjoy the being able to interact with them 2 or 3 times a week, but they're more like, leave me alone and let me do what I need to get done. And it's almost, it comes off sometimes with the daily check-ins or the every other day check-ins is almost more of a nuisance to them because they can't get done what they need to get done. So it's kind of like the flip side of, we want to interact, we want to check in on our people, and we end up seeing each other in various Zoom meetings, all day, every day anyways. But it's kind of funny with my particular crew, whereas we all get along, we all love interacting with each other, but 3 months worth of, or 2 months worth or whatever it's been, can't even keep track of time now, but of just constantly having to have Zoom meetings with people all the time. I think we're all kind of burnt out from it, and everyone's ready just to get back in the office and get back to somewhat normal. So that's one of the biggest challenges, trying to keep not the staff motivated to get done what they need to get done, because they're doing a phenomenal job with that, but it's like, they don't necessarily want to have to do, they feel it's more of a nuisance that we're having to do, 2 or 3 times a week check-ins and all. And so that's been kind of the flip side of it. I think we're all zoomed out and ready to just be back into, face-to-face and human interactions again, which sadly, even with us starting to trickle back into the office, we're still doing all Zoom meetings for everything. So it's just kind of crazy.
Hey, this is Jerrod Jackson at LSU. And, the thing that I've learned most during this process is that transparency is super important. What I've had to do, if you think about it, when you're sitting in your office and say your assistant director for adventure comes and talks to you about a project that they're going to do, and then all of a sudden, y'all come up with what they need to do for certain steps, and it involves the facilities team. And the assistant director for facilities office is right next to yours. Well, your adventure person is going to leave out of your office, go straight into their office and tell them, hey, I just talked to Jerrod about this. We're going to do this. And that communication's happened. But when you have that conversation over Zoom, that other person's not on the Zoom with you. And so having to learn that, and having to learn that, those walks that you get to do down the office hallway to be able to speak to people and get that word out, that's just not happening. So what I've tried to do, one thing I've done, we're using Microsoft Teams for communication. And so my programming staff, I'm like, do not ask me a question directly. I've gotten all the programmers in one group, and any question that they have to ask me, I want them to ask to everybody, just so everybody knows what's going on. Because that's what we miss by not being in the office, is that we don't have that opportunity to, for lack of a better term, eavesdrop and hear conversations from the next office and how it would affect our area. So that's something that we've had to talk about, and something that I've realized is that that transparency piece has become more important in our work from home, because you take for granted that walk that you take down the hallway in the office, and you cannot do that anymore. And so you've had to make that change and make that transition in order to keep your staff knowledgeable on what's going on. And I've also realized in my communication with them, if I put it in there, now I don't forget to tell certain people certain things. I just tell my whole team. So that's been a welcome thing. And I think that my staff would say that that's helped them a lot learn what's going on with other areas, so they see how it affects their area as well.
I want to jump in off of that, Jerrod, because one of the things that I would share as a challenge is I don't know how many of you all have someone that's a peer at your level. I have two. And so as we're in spaces where we're learning, like it used to be minute by minute. Now, thankfully, it's slowed down to be more like day by day. Things are changing, or there's new things we need to be worried about or share. Like what are some of the things y'all are doing, much like Jerrod just shared, that are ways to make sure not only are you sharing kind of consistently with all the people that you're supporting, but also consistently in terms of like what your peers are sharing? Because when you have a large department, I feel like that's been a really big challenge. I'd be curious to know, like, if any of you have had success kind of more at that peer level consistency. I've asked the hard question. Have I ruined it? Did I break Zoom? Zoom?
You're the rock star, like, right, like mic drop, right? It's wonderful.
Yeah.
I wanted to share, my name's Ann Storey. I'm from Sheridan College. I'm the Assistant Director of Campus Life and Housing. And Erin, to your question, I don't know that we're very small. I mean, there's only 3 professional staff. But one thing I've been thinking about lately is I'm an introvert, big time. I'm probably one of 3 in this whole meeting, or in all of NIRSA. So I've really actually enjoyed working from home. It's nice. But I also have some really serious concerns going back. I'm also immune compromised, and I can't be the only one. So I think as leaders, we need to be mindful that not everyone is super stoked to go back to the office. I'm excited to see my colleagues and my students, but I'm not excited to be around humans again. And so just something to throw out there as people are coming back. They may not say that. I'm the person that'll say it, but they may not say that. So just another consideration as us in positions of leadership, to be thoughtful about those who don't want to be around. So are there spaces we can make for them? Is there another office they can work in? Whatever that might look like. So that's my challenge right now, is physically walking back into that building and having humans come to my office. That's terrifying.
Hi, this is Lauren Martini Olson from the University of South Carolina. I think maybe, Erin, the reason your question went quiet is because maybe we don't feel like we've been successful in some of that cross communication. I may have an example here, but I don't know how successful I'm being, and so I want to put that information out front first. So we have not reopened yet. We're anticipating opening towards the end of the month. But we do have about 30% of our staff back in the building to prep for that. So we've gone from, everybody at home and meeting, I still meet with my staff every day. Sometimes it's 15 minutes, sometimes it's an hour. It depends on what information is coming out. But we've gone from, meeting every day and sort of finding a rhythm to now 2 of my 8 staff are in the building. And so they have different priorities. And so now our communication has changed again. So we went from everyone being at home to now sort of half in, half out. And then in 2 weeks, another 30% of our staff will go back. We're doing it in phases. And so then I am actually going to be one of the few that stays home. But so then, most of my staff will be back in the building, and then there'll only be about two or three of us still at home. And so that communication challenge is going to continue for us. And so I'm just learning to try and figure out, join our daily meeting when you can. When you can't, when there's stuff to do on site, please, make that certainly our priority. But but know that if something is missed, we'll try and catch up or find a colleague or a friend that can let you know what's sort of missed. But I will say sort of we try not to call it reaching across the aisle between ops and programs, and sometimes it feels like that. But my staff actually brought it to me, which makes me very happy, is that last week, since some of them are in the building and some aren't, they've realized that like, oh, I thought ops was doing this, but now I realize that they're not, because they're assuming we are because it's our area, or vice versa. I've been working on capacities in this room for whatever, and now I realize ops already has that determined. And so we actually are going to set up a meeting later this week with, you know, the ops staff and sort of the programming staff, which currently is basically fitness, sport programs, and outdoor rec. And to make sure everybody has their questions answered and there's no assumptions going into not only the continued reopening plans, but the actual reopening. And so I've encouraged them to make a list, compile that list. We're going to send it to the ops team prior to the meeting so they know what's coming, so they're not confused or you know, unprepared. And then they'll have the opportunity to make sure that, you know, they don't make any assumptions for our team as well. And so we're trying to continuously break down those silos and not think of it in that way. But when you're separated and it's hard to do a Teams call with 24 people, and it's much easier to do it with, you know, 2 groups of 8 or whatever. That's sort of how we've managed it. Like I said, I don't know if we're successful yet, or we'll find out here in the next couple of weeks. But that is just some of the things that we've done to try and make sure that communication happens, and it's happening not only within teams or staffs, but across the board, because we are going to need to rely on each other now, obviously more than ever. So.
Erin, this is Brooke at Alabama. I don't know if it's necessarily peer-to-peer, but our leadership team has opened up our weekly staff meetings to our assistant directors as well. And I've found that to be really helpful because it gets more information out to more people faster. And allows us to have a little bit of that interaction like we would normally have walking in the office suite, because you're seeing people that you might not necessarily normally be on a call with. So that's helped us a good bit. And then kind of going back to a little bit of the Zoom burnout, we talked about recently, you know, making some of the things Zoom, but, you know, calling people on the phone and being a little old fashioned that way, just to give people that personal space of, you get to have the personal touch and conversation, but you're not having to be on quite as much as you are when you're on a video.
I think one thing, Erin, to answer your question also, I don't think I've had a single leadership team meeting where immediately following that meeting, I didn't call one of the other associate directors. And it was to get an understanding of something I missed or to discuss something that we have to do going forward or whatnot. But I know Brad's on this call too and whatnot, but after almost every single leadership meeting, and then also after meetings that I have with my program team, I'm reaching back out to the other associate directors. I'm like, hey, this came up, or hey, can you explain what this meant? Or how can I explain how something is supposed to go? But it's had to be, you know, intentional to make sure that we are getting the same understanding where, you know, we might not ask that question in the whole meeting, but we know who we need to go to afterwards, and just making sure that we do that. And one thing that I think our team's done a good job of is, you know, I think that we've asked coordinators and assistant directors to try to go through their associate directors instead of going across the aisle, because that does make us work together even more. So it's like, if you have a question about maintenance for the building, you know, while I'd love for you to go straight to the associate director, if I don't know about it, it's hard for me to help you with it as well. So them reaching out and then giving us a chance to reach out and then get us all together as a group to talk so that we're all aware of what's going on has been a very good thing. And the last thing I'll say is, all you introverts, I love you, but shout out to the extroverts too, because some of us are.
Well, I don't want to stifle the really great feedback that we're getting right now, but maybe we're right up about the halfway point. But I want to insert one other question for you, just in thinking about yourselves as leaders, your positions, but have you learned anything new about yourself in this particular time, these past 2-3 months? Anything in particular about your leadership style that has morphed or changed? Developed any new skill sets for your position? Has anything like that come up for anyone? I shared earlier, again, on a personal note, I did not realize the degree to which I could be highly relational as when I had to be highly relational in this time, which has been really great to realize that, and has given me a newfound confidence in that side of myself, which is really great. But does anybody else have anything like that that has come up over the last couple of months for them?
Oh, I want to talk about this one. I definitely have. I work at the University of Texas, El Paso. I'm the Associate Director of Programs. And what I've learned is my team loves all the daily check-ins. So I used to do a 3-day-a-week check-in, and now I do daily check-in, and they love it. And so what I've learned is I've noticed team members that really need a lot of attention. So I've made a vow, and going forward, when we do get back to the building, I am going to have like a structured donut time or coffee break time where we can do that. And then I've noticed that my ideas are a lot better received, and I'm more accepted. So that's definitely something that I learned and that I'm going to change going forward.
I just have to shout out to Mark and he's learned he can snack and have second and third breakfast.
You know, I think for me, it's not being involved as the programming side, not being involved in a lot of the operational meetings that are held, not just at our level, but above us, that they're trying to figure everything out. I think I've learned that I have to be proactive in asking more questions because they're all, you know, the operational side are all in these meetings and they know what's going on. And then all of a sudden something comes out. And as one of the people who should be able to provide the information for my staff, I didn't have a clue. And because, and we know that part of that is just things change so rapidly right now from where we're at, that sometimes it's hard to keep up. But I think the staff then get a little bit frustrated because, you know, well, why didn't you tell us that? Well, because I didn't know, right? So I just have to be more proactive in asking questions. When I know they're having meetings, I have to reach out to them because they're talking to so many people that it's sometimes I think it's just out of sight, out of mind, literally, and they don't think who they need to update on that regular basis because they're probably getting so sick of talking about it and then it changing the next day themselves. So being more proactive is where I need to, you know, what I'm learning about myself.
To jump off of that, Vicki, I was thinking, oh, sorry, I'm Karina Knutson from the University of North Dakota. I feel like we're all friends now. We've been talking for, 40 minutes, 30 minutes. But I was thinking as people are transitioning back into the office and having those hallway conversations, I know my position will most likely be somebody who's going to stay remote for quite some time, just as we're kind of doing that phased approach in. And so knowing that, say half the team is going to be able to talk, face-to-face, in person, stop in the doorway, have that quick chat, then half the team is going to be at home. And so how do those individuals make sure that those who are at home still get looped in? So it's just this different level of communication, transparency. So if it's using Teams, if it's using, emails, whatever the case may be, but just making sure that those who are in the office are still being proactively communicating to those who aren't right there to kind of get that quick, hey, this is the decision that was just made right now in the hallway. So.
This is Ryan Wingers from Georgia Southern University. Part of my job is also taking a lead on risk management within our department. And I think maybe projecting forward as we start talking about reopening consistently and planning for the fall, speaking to Ann earlier about personal concerns of health and bringing people back in the workplace, it's also the students and planning what's best for them based off of leadership and varying personal opinions of what is the appropriate risk management or risk aversion, and navigating all those opinions, be it your reports, some who think naturally it shouldn't be that big of a deal, and then some who are thinking we need to go to the nth degree to protect ourselves and to protect the students. Combining that with what the university's directive is, and combining that with, is it our role in collaboration with, say, university medical director, university legal, and navigating maybe a supervisor's opinion of educating, like, hey, this is an opinion, this is what's out there, versus, and then translating a message down or up, and just navigating the messages coming from both sides. A lot of it right now has just been waiting and seeing for us, but looking forward as we begin to put things in place, I think that's going to be a lot of conversations moving forward to get people to a place of comfort, and it's going to be very individual for people.
This is Vicki. I just think that right now I am seeing, like, I can see several faces, and thank you. I enjoy seeing your faces. But when someone's talking and I can't see their face, I find myself really having difficulty concentrating on what's being said. And I think that's the people part of me that I don't know how to change that. And so when we have meetings and we have Zoom meetings, it's really important for me to be able to be engaged and in touch with what's actually going on. So no offense to you all that don't want your face shown on here, but that's one of the things I have to deal with, is that it's really hard for me to focus on what's being said if I can't see you speaking. And so I don't know if anybody else has that issue, but all of a sudden everybody's coming on that screen. Thank you. But that's just something that I'm finding about myself. And I think that's, again, that relational piece, where I like just talking face to face, but I'm having to deal with that. So those people that, that choose, and that's perfectly fine, that choose not to be present visually, just know that, if I don't follow up or I don't talk, that's what I tell my staff. If I'm not responding to you, part of that's because I probably just couldn't follow what you're saying, because I am just I have to see your face kind of person. So.
Well, and Vicki, I think not just from like how does an organization find ways to communicate that suits like everyone's learning styles, that makes me think even like how all of us are transitioning the way we train our staffs right now, and how it's going to likely be a very hybrid approach for a while. And there's just like a lot we can learn about the different ways we all engage each other, our preferences, and also some learning styles and communication styles. I think those are all things I think about, not just from a communication with my peers lens, right? I'm going to do a quick check-in with Lance and Victoria to make sure that if I transition here that I'm okay, I've got their support. That's all I needed from them. This has been awesome and super helpful. And as you saw both in the Connect post, but also in with what Victoria shared at the front end of the meeting, we were hoping to kind of have two conversations that I think are related. So I don't mean to present them as a part one, part two binary. They are connected 100%, but we're going to transition more to the second part of today's session, which was our role as leading from the middle, and how we are showing up as leaders in our departments to be thinking about and talking about and acting around the racism that's been going on in our country since the country started and before, but has obviously made a lot more media recently. Because while we are collegiate recreation professionals, a lot of our business is humans, right? We serve the people on our campuses. And so this is definitely, this is our lane still, just to be real clear, this is our lane to be talking about these things. And so we're hoping to go through a couple different prompts. And I think one of the things is, again, knowing we are leaders in our organizations. What are some of the things as leaders we're doing to discuss the current events with our staffs, or maybe just to honor the labor? Maybe there are things you've already been doing for a long time, but wanted to open up the conversation there with how you are discussing current events with your staff, either individually or in group spaces.
This is Chris Muller at UTA. Our Multicultural Affairs Office had a town hall on Monday, and I invited our staff to go with me to the virtual town hall. So I felt like it was important not to say, hey, this is something you should really think about doing, but really say, hey, I'm going to be there as well. And, I hope that you get a chance to go with me. And I sent that to our student staff that reports to me as well. So that's something that I've done, as well as connect with a few of the staff that are in our department that are people of color, just to check on them and see how they're doing, and to hear their feelings and their thoughts and ideas about everything. And it was really eye-opening for me and really important for me as a Caucasian male to hear those thoughts and to be able to better understand where they're coming from. And I use that word really lightly because I can never, as a white male, understand and put myself in their shoes, but to try to get a better understanding of where they're coming
from. Hi, this is Sophia Marshall from UNC Charlotte. I have a few things. First of all, after the event, the racial injustice that happened, it was like in 1 week. I had a meeting with my supervisor in person, and it was just ignored. Like, not ignored, but it was, we didn't even talk about it. And so, so that didn't kind of sit well with me. So I slept on it, and then I sent out an email to my supervisor, the director, along with the rest of our professional staff, just saying like, we can't avoid it. And basically saying I'm not okay. I'm used to being the go-to person where everybody come and tell me their issues and I try to work through. And I'm like, I can't be there for you right now because I'm not okay. And so I think, first of all, being a woman of color, being okay with taking the mask off that we, label professionalism, and just being transparent and say like, listen, if I don't have my Zoom camera on this week, or if I cancel a meeting, it's because I can't do it today. And so, people having to be okay with that. So that's not something that I've ever done before. I just try to, in the past, I've just tried to work through it, but this one, it hit differently for me. Secondly, same as Chris who just talked, our MRC did some virtual forums, but we're such a close-knit staff, and our staff is so diverse. Although we invited them to attend, I know that they feel a little bit more comfortable talking to us within UREC. So we're doing a open forum on this Thursday for just our UREC student staff, professional staff, and allies, for people to just talk about what they need to talk about, their feelings. And then we had just started a women of color mentor program. We started it they call themselves the founders. So it's 10 women of color student employees that work for us, and they're kind of helping to navigate what that looks like, and we're going to roll it out in the fall. But anyways, we're using, so we're using those people to kind of get the word out to their peers. Like, yeah, we're sending out an email, join this forum, but asking those people, the women of color group, to also push it out amongst our peers and encourage them to attend. So I'll let you guys know how that goes, how, if people are engaging in that, or if they, don't want to do it at all, how many showed up, just to give you an idea, so that if it's something you all want to implement, soon, then you can. But like I said, it's not until Thursday. We're doing 2 sessions, one in the morning, one in the afternoon.
That's awesome. Thank you for sharing that. And it makes me think too, what you've shared about up the chain, right? Your experience talking to your supervisor, and then my reflection is immediately the people that I am a supervisor to then, and how am I supporting the conversation and not ignoring things. So I appreciate how that helps us think about both directions, right? Because as middle managers, that's what we're doing all the time, is thinking in both directions. What are some of those other things? Yeah, go ahead.
What I hear too is thinking about where people are. Not people are utilizing resources on campus to maybe engage in dialogue, and others may have the skills or ability to be able to host the conversation, with their staff. And I think, both are appropriate, and trying to maybe hear from people, where are people, with that, and are there for people who are comfortable being able to share tips or insight into, sharing and holding space for uncomfortable dialogue, and then of course, utilizing those resources. What I will share is, with our department, I had a conversation with our department, and of course, yep, it was uncomfortable and people were not talking. And then other people were sharing, and everyone is in a different place when it comes to to this kind of work, but really thinking about our role in this and systemic oppression, our own policies, procedures, our own programs, and those types of things. So how to frame all of it and have space and hold space for it. I'm really curious how people are feeling, and if they have any other insights and sharing about what they've done, or maybe even what you're afraid to do.
This is Ben at Boise State. We were actually in the process of doing this earlier this month or last month, but we did a book club at the beginning of quarantine just to kind of bring everyone together. And we decided from the DEI committee to read the NIRSA EDI guide as a part of our book club. And so that's what we're doing now. And it's a pretty neat way to just maneuver through that. Our staff are all at different levels, I guess, in regard to their DEI knowledge and things like that. And there's always more work to be done no matter what. But we found that to be a cool place because we are going to expect more from our pro staff to engage in these conversations. And so this is our hope that we all start to possess the knowledge to at least have those baseline conversations and things like that. So we had the first meeting last week. It went really well. It was a good start. We've also engaged in an all staff meeting around the results of things that have happened in our country last week. A lot of people shared it was very emotional, but I think it was a very positive experience too. So I would encourage others to do that.
So I'm going to keep this short, but because I don't want to get emotional. First of all, thanks to Sophia, because what she said is absolutely true. And I think the biggest thing that we can do as associate directors is realize that when people tell you they're not okay, that's not a time to push. That's not a time to require more. I mean, it's the time to give them space. Because the one thing I'll say is it takes all of us to realize that all of us are individuals. And I can't speak for how everybody that looks like me feels. And you can't speak for how everybody looks like you feel. And some folks just need more space than others. And it's okay to tell your boss, and it's okay to tell your staff that I cannot be there for you today. I can't. And I had more to say and I lost my train of thought, so somebody else speak.
Jerrod, thank you for sharing that. And Sophia, I think, again, like always trying to listen to what other people are telling us. If they're giving us that labor, right? Like the absolute minimum we can do is listen. And so when I hear what Jerrod just shared specifically, I am thinking about then, like as an associate director, right? How am I then making sure that I'm listening to what my staff is telling me? And then also there's all these other nuances too of like, if someone reporting up to you has a particular role in your department that can't really wait with what they're working on, then what kind of skills can you just bring in, right? To kind of give the space that they've asked for. And that might mean we have to know a lot about a lot, right, to do that. But that's probably way more important than asking someone to labor at a time where they have already told us they don't have that capacity right now. Yeah, listening is listening is a skill that we often, I don't think, give enough credit to, and is a lot harder to do than we realize sometimes. Or that is my perspective. Maybe I'm the bad listener. So thanks for sharing.
You know, what I can share as well is as more questions and answers, like I feel like oftentimes people who are directly affected or like Black, Indigenous, people of color are then have to carry the additional burden of trying to educate everybody. And it's a time, and right now, where it's like, I'm tired. Like, I can't create a special curriculum for you and your journey. Like, you got to step up and you got to do your own learning and you got to figure this out. Like, and I can't do that for you. And I think that it's okay. And it's not like a, you know, giving you, like, not rude, but it's like, we just can't do me and help you. I think it's a hard place to be. Sophia, I see you nodding, right? Yes, yeah.
Yes. Very true. I had something else I wanted to say. I'm like, Jerry, I lost it. But, one thing that I pride myself on is being a strong Black woman. And so another thing I think is important is that I've learned that sometimes, you know, you hear the saying, fake it until you make it, but also in the same regard, like at times you gotta, for your own mental health, there's sometimes that you can't fake it. And so I realized that being a strong Black woman also means showing up as my authentic self. And so if I'm not feeling it, then it's okay to express that. And so I think, you know, going back to a question you asked, I think when we were in the COVID part of it is that I've learned that it's okay for me to tell my true feelings and show up as my authentic self. And if it's not okay, it's going to have to be okay, because that's what it is now. So.
Okay, I got together for the last thing I was going to say. I'm sorry. But the other thing that I could say that I found a little offensive over the last couple of weeks is, while people of color is a good term, what was going on in the world was a Black issue. And it would be nice to see people own it as Black who are saying things, not just people of color. Because when we say people of color, it takes the color off of whose issue it really is.
I agree.
And I think one thing that, you know, Victoria was saying, and you know, it's been echoed here, is that, you know, with EDI, there's an intentionality, and if we are actually want to make change, we got to put resources into it. You know, Victoria, you talk about, you know, it's tiring and it's up to you. So now it's time for organizations and institutions to start compensating that learning and education, because so often we'll go to our staff and say, oh, well, hey, you have this experience, can you help educate this? And if we're not putting those resources, we put money towards marketing campaigns. Now we need to start having EDI line items in our budget. If it's that important, it can no longer just be, oh yes, I'm going to put a statement on that says we support this. Where's the action that is coming from and the change that needs to occur? We need to prioritize that. And to prioritize that, that means putting money and resources to these. It's about having those outcomes. It's about taking our rules, our policies, and looking at them through a lens of EDI and saying, who is not showing up and why? What are we doing to prevent this? What barriers are we creating? What institutional racist structure do we have in place? And that's even within our own rec centers, as open as we'd like to think. You know, we're even stemming down to talking about how masks can be, you know, hard for those of hard of hearing. But we don't look at those lenses until someone who has that challenge comes to us. And then we start trying to think, okay, well, what can we do? We should start looking at that first and start looking at those and start asking those questions, and then start putting the resources towards that, because it's not just going to happen, and it can't be on someone's desk. It can't be because we have one officer in the institution that's an diversity and inclusion officer. That's ridiculous. It's everyone's job, and it's all of us to do that. And so we need to start systemically looking at, and we can do that within our own programs, within our own areas, and start asking those questions. But systemically, we need to put resources and money, and we need to say this needs to stop, and we need to systemically change some of our practices so that it doesn't continue.
We have a little less than 10 minutes left on our scheduled call, and I do want to respect everybody's time. So I don't know if there are some additional tidbits or if there are any questions that people might have for the group to be able to learn or share some more.
Hey, this is Lashica from Columbus State University. I was driving earlier, so I wasn't able to ask my question during the first part of our conversation. So I'm going to ask it now. I have professional staff that report to me during this time, and one of the challenges is keeping them motivated. We have our Zoom calls, we're doing the one-on-ones, I'm checking in 2-3 times a week, and then I'll just call them. I even did house parties so we can have our team building activity, just to, so we're not always just getting together to talk about work. But the level of what they're producing, right? We were here, and then it's like slowly trickling down. Right. And I know that's because it's the stress of everything going on. So what are y'all doing in order to help with that with your staff when you're noticing things like that happening? Or is it just my staff? Because it could be. We down here in Georgia, we're doing some crazy stuff in Georgia. So it's a lot happening in Georgia.
Hey, Lashica, this is Becky Todd from the University of Arkansas, and I've seen that back and forth with some of my staff, and sometimes I've just called and asked them directly, like, hey, what's going on? And some of them will just be discouraged, and I'll say, okay, well, why don't you take a week or two to step back and maybe not try to crank out so much programming when you're having a struggle, and try to figure out where we can pick it up somewhere else. But some of them, it's just this long term. This is not an environment where they're great at. And I'm just trying to be as understanding as I can and figure out where we can sort of pivot their efforts and move forward. I don't think that's a great answer, but I want you to know that you're not alone. And just sometimes having that personal conversation with each person when they hit their point of struggle, because they all has been helpful for me, and for them to just be able to acknowledge that with me. And then we sort of take a break and then come back a few weeks later and try to have a new effort.
Thank you for that.
Lashica, this is Vicki, and I think the thing that I've noticed is that I need to be sensitive to things that may not affect me the same as they affect my staff. And so I've really tried to keep the dialogue open personally, not about work, but personally, just to do check-ins that way. And some of you have said that throughout, but in doing so, I think the staff have felt really comfortable to say to me, throw me a text or whatever to say, you know what, I'm struggling today with everything going on. I need to take care of my kids. I need to hug my kids, whatever that is. And I say, go. And I think we just have to be more kind.
I'm going to turn on my video for Vicki. The reason I didn't have it on is because, of course, it started being blurry 1 week into the stay at home. So my staff has been looking at blurry me for 8 weeks or 10 weeks or 12 weeks or whatever we're in now. I think the point about being aware that everyone is dealing with things differently. And just because we mentioned extroverts and introverts before, it's just because what works for me or what space I live in isn't what everybody else lives in. So I know one of the biggest challenges that we've had at South Carolina is we have a campus rec group me. We have Teams primarily. Some people use Zoom. We have email, there's text. There's so many ways to communicate. And at the beginning, I tried to like funnel everybody into one thing because it was hard for me to manage 7 different channels of communication. But I found that because people were working from home and had different internet options and spacing in their house and where they prefer to work and where they thrived in working, I kind of had to own, okay, I may be getting a text from someone and a Teams chat from someone and an email from someone else, but I'm going to let that happen because that's where they're comfortable. And I need to be mindful of, I can try and manage all this while trying to make their lives a little easier instead of telling everyone they have to email one, because that would be way too many emails because it's how we communicate now. But I think the point of, you know, where I am is not where everybody else is. And so accepting that, but then the piece is also voicing that. I found the best thing I did after that was tell them that you guys do what you're comfortable with. I'll take it on, I'll figure it out. Whatever's easiest for you, I'll do. And it gave them sort of the okay and the approval to do that. And I saw some appreciation from them and realizing that everybody doesn't fit in a box, and they certainly don't fit in my box, and I need to be mindful of that. And so I think if nothing else, we've joked a lot about if this experience has not made you more patient and more flexible and more adaptable, we've made the joke that I can't save you. No leadership book can save you if you are not more adaptable and flexible after this. But I think it has opened up lines of communication that maybe were never there before, and it has really increased the honest conversation that people have, and it's allowed for transparency, and it's allowed for frustration, and it's allowed for that to be okay. And so I think not only owning some of that people deal with different things, but having that conversation and allowing people to either understand it, that, you know, especially I have a couple young professionals that are dealing with this very differently than some of my veteran staff. And they may not just even see the big picture of it, but I think having those really open and honest conversations, I think will have brought my staff closer together, even though certainly we've been farther apart over the last couple of weeks.
As we wrap up our time, I do want to thank everybody for contributing. I do want to acknowledge the authenticity and realism, the realness, not realism, realness that has been shared today. Just thinking, we wanted to provide a space for people to talk about our challenges and what are we learning and what are we struggling with and how can we learn from each other. I think that with COVID-19 in particular, NIRSA has been able to be flexible and think about how can we think of different ways to come together and still learn from each other. And then, you know, grow from there. So if you would like to continue these types of conversations and these roundtables, we're always open to that feedback, because when you no longer want them, then we'll stop hosting them. And it's also open. So, you know, this time around, Erin and Lance, they were my partners. And so it doesn't always have to be the Victoria show. I'm also happy to, you know, again, grow other people. If there are other things that you'll want to talk about, thinking about that mid-level, that mid-manager lens. I also know that because of the recent murders of Breonna Taylor and George Floyd, like there is a need and a desire to still have conversation. So if that's something that as a NIRSA community, we want to have, I think NIRSA wants to hear from you, and they are looking for ways to figure out ways to support our members. And again, thinking about those tools, right? For some of us, it might not be comfortable to even talk about it or trying to find the language. Others, we're absolutely comfortable with having that kind of dialogue. So how can we learn and grow personally as well as professionally? And then how can we also help those above us as well as those that we supervise in this, you know, role that we serve? Lance and Erin, do you have anything you want to close out with and share before we conclude?
feel compelled to say one thing, and that is, and this, I say it to myself, and if this helps anyone hear this, my reflection of late has very much been, why is now the time that white folks like myself are suddenly able to hear what has been happening forever? And so if that kind of like, that question helps those in NIRSA engage differently, I think we need to do more. And also we need to do some really hard reflection on why now all of a sudden we have woken up to what is happening. So if that helps anyone else, that's kind of something I've wondered and have thought about a lot lately.
Good. All I have to share is, I know not everybody shares my worldview, but my faith compels me to love everyone around me. And so I just want to encourage everybody to love those around you. That's it.
Well, thank you, everybody. Again, we will, it looks like we will try and pull everybody together again. We'll see what the world is like in a month, right? Appreciate all of you. Have a lovely afternoon, and thanks.